Bang! A sharp crack tore through the dining room like a gunshot in a cathedral. Crystal chandeliers quivered overhead. Champagne flutes froze mid-air. A lady in a deep crimson satin gown let out a gasp as a splash of blood-orange sauce hit her cheek and slid down like a ruined stroke of makeup. The kitchen door slammed open with a violent kick. Marcus Thorne stormed in like a walking tempest apron, crumpled one hand gripping a shattered plate, eyes burning like twin embers on the verge of eruption. "This is supposed to be my imperial scallop. This is garbage!" He roared, as if ripping apart every thread of his own honor. He hurled the broken plate to the floor. Crash! The porcelain exploded like someone had just smashed a gold medal into pieces. Standing before him was a young, slender waiter in a black apron, Leo Martinez. His cheeks had gone pale, eyes glassy with held-back tears, hands clutching the silver tray like it was the last scrap of dignity he had left. "You humiliated me. You disgraced the Vance name," Marcus shouted each word, cracking through the air like a whip slicing both silence and pride. A renowned food critic stood up. No one stopped him. No one dared say a word. The opulent space of Aria crystal lights, shimmering like stardust violins, weaving a soft sonata menus printed in gold ink, had turned into a stage of humiliation. No more clinking of cutlery, no more murmured conversations. Only a choking silence crept across every table. From a shadowed corner, a man set down his water glass. Julian Vance, the founder of Aria, a living legend in American gastronomy. He sat at table 1, the place he always chose to go unnoticed. No one saw his expression. But look closely, and you'd find his eyes gray, deep, and cold, like steel forged in a blizzard. They didn't narrow. They didn't blink. He wasn't surprised. He had sensed this coming. A single drop of water slid down the glass landing on the ebony table with a faint, sharp click, the only sound in a room frozen in time. Inside his chest, a crack had just formed, and what frightened him most was that he could hear it spreading. Leo knelt on the marble floor, bare hands picking up shards of broken porcelain, as carefully as if he feared touching something even more fragile, his pride. A bead of blood slid down his finger, mixing with a streak of leftover sauce. But Leo didn't flinch. He didn't cry. He just bowed his head, shoulders curling inward, as if trying to shrink into nothing more than a shadow beneath someone else's feet. The soft, golden lights of Aria no longer offered warmth. They now felt like spotlights exposing a sinner who had no right to defend himself. Julian watched the scene unfold, something in his chest, tightening like an invisible string being drawn taut. He saw something familiar, no painfully familiar, in the way Leo hunched over in the flushed red of his ears, burning with shame. He gently touched his left wrist. There a scar, thin as a razor blade. And as if triggered, a memory snapped open. 30 years ago. Hell's Kitchen. A tiny kitchen choked with smoke and grease, cramped like a steam chamber. The fan wheezed. The air reeked of scorched oil. Julian, then just an immigrant dish boy, stood awkwardly at the sink. A cast-iron pan flew past his head, grazing his wrist with a fiery sting. "Imbecile tu as gâché ma sauce! Idiot, you ruined my sauce!" The French chef roared, his voice thick with disdain. Julian didn't reply, didn't resist. He simply bowed his head, tears mixing with sweat as they dripped into the stainless steel sink. That was his first lesson in the American dream: to survive, you must endure pain. But that very night, staring into a grease-smudged mirror, Julian made a vow: if he ever owned a restaurant, no one would live in fear the way he once did. No one would flinch at a flying pan, a contemptuous glare, or a dream torn apart by insults. And now, at the heart of the empire he built, history was repeating itself. Julian slowly returned to the present. Leo was still picking up the fragments. Marcus stood tall, chin high, as if he had just won a duel of honor. The rest of the staff looked down, pretending to be busy. No one spoke. No one intervened. He couldn't let this continue. Julian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. His fingers moved through the contact list with a cold precision. A short message was typed, "Pull Table 1 camera audio. Access all ARIA HR complaint logs for the past 6 months. Discreet. No signature needed." The recipient, David, head of security, would understand. The message was sent without hesitation. The game had begun. Julian rose from table 1. No one noticed. He moved with the calm of a diner, simply stepping away between courses, but each step brought him closer to the center of a slow-burning fire. He paused at the bar where the lights were softer, where words were usually lighter, but more truthful. 2 bartenders stood polishing glasses, heads down. Their lips were tight, but their eyes kept flicking toward the kitchen, as if bracing for the next disaster. "Last week it was Maria," one of them murmured without lifting his head. "Yeah, she quit." After Marcus made her cry right in the middle of service, the other replied, wiping a glass while glancing around. "I heard she got a lawyer." No one said more, but Julian didn't need full sentences. He was fluent in the silent language of places where something was deeply wrong. The half-spoken fragments, the averted eyes, the silent shakes of the head that never dared become words. He moved on down the hallway toward the back. With every step, his conviction grew stronger. Arya wasn't facing a technical issue. It was rotting from the inside. He gently pushed open the door to the men's restroom. Empty. Just the faint scent of hand soap and soft lighting reflecting off glossy white tile walls, and a mirror where things were often clearer than they seemed. Julian paused. Something felt off. He stepped closer, looked carefully. On the surface of the glass, someone had written a message in smudged red lipstick. It had been wiped poorly, but still clung there like an open wound that refused to heal. "He is killing us." 4 words. No poetry, no metaphor. Just a desperate scream. Julian didn't blink. He reached out lightly, touching the blurred stain. His fingertip glided across the cold surface, leaving another smudge behind, as if he were touching a vein of invisible blood that the entire restaurant was trying to hide. He knew messages like this weren't written out of frustration. They appeared only when despair had pushed past its breaking point, when fear had no exit left. Julian straightened. There was no doubt anymore. This wasn't a small fire. This was a malignant tumor, and surgery was the only cure. "Table 14, severe peanut allergy," Leo repeated for the second time, voice steady and clear, clutching the order slip like it was a life-or-death contract. He looked Marcus straight in the eyes, no trembling, no flinching. "I marked it in red. I told the line sous chef clearly, but I wanted you to know directly." Marcus didn't look at him. He simply waved him off. "Don't waste my time with trivial nonsense." The kitchen buzzed with sizzling sounds, the scent of burnt butter thick in the air, smoke rising from an overcooked sauce. Marcus was fuming over a misaligned salmon fillet, hurling a freshly plated dish into the trash, like tossing away a piece of torn fabric. His fury crackled through the kitchen like charged air before a storm. No one dared speak. No one saw. The peanut oil brushed lightly across the pan. No one saw, except Leo, and he froze in place. 10 minutes later. Table 14. A blonde woman in a silver suit had just taken her first bite. It started with a cough. Then both hands clutched her collar. She shot up, eyes wide, lips beginning to swell. Her chair toppled. A glass of red wine spilled across her skirt. A scream rang out. Someone shouted epinephrine, someone get the EpiPen staff scrambled. A few diners stood turning away in shock. Izzy, pure instinct, rushed in. She grabbed the EpiPen from the medical cabinet near the kitchen door and jabbed it swiftly into the woman's thigh. Holding the woman's trembling hand, she whispered, "You're okay. Look at me. Breathe. You're okay." 911 had already been called. The guest would survive, but Arya would not. Minutes later, while the guest was being loaded into an ambulance, Marcus stormed into the center of the kitchen as if nothing had happened. "This was your fault," he screamed into Leo's face, eyes blazing. "You didn't emphasize it enough. How the hell am I supposed to remember everything?" Leo froze. He hadn't even had time to speak before Marcus ripped the apron from his chest. The tearing sound was sharp, almost surgical. "I don't need some naive dreamer in my kitchen." "You're fired. Get out. Your dream ends here." Marcus's voice echoed through the kitchen. No one spoke. Leo stood motionless, clutching his shirt, the place where his apron had once shielded a fragile dream. Izzy couldn't hold back anymore. She stepped forward, placing herself between Leo and Marcus. "Stop it, Marcus. You know this wasn't Leo's fault." "Shut up, Izzy. I run this kitchen, and you just nearly killed someone. If I hadn't been there, the guest would be dead. Don't you dare deflect blame to cleanse your own hands." The entire kitchen fell silent. From afar, Julian had seen everything. He didn't step in. He didn't speak, but within him, a judgment had been passed. Marcus had crossed the final line. He hadn't just endangered a customer. He had tried to kill a dream that once saved Julian when all he had were his bare hands. And to Julian Vance, that was a sin beyond forgiveness. Leo stumbled out the back door, his shoes sliding slightly on the tiled floor, as if each step was too heavy to lift. The metal door slammed shut behind him, severing all sound from Arya's kitchen. Outside, a narrow alley, dim and desolate, lit only by a flickering yellow bulb that cast its light over industrial dumpsters and a cracked brick wall. A cold wind blew through. Leo didn't feel it. He collapsed to the ground, back against the wall, arms wrapped around his knees. The apron was gone, only a wrinkled black shirt remained, and his hands were stained with sauce that had dried into streaks. Everything had just come crashing down. He pulled his phone from his pocket hands, shaking so badly he had to enter his passcode twice. "First contact in his list, Mama." The phone rang, then connected. "Hello, can my baby hear me?" The woman's voice came through, tired but gentle, familiar, like a hug Leo hadn't felt in 3 long months. He swallowed hard. His voice cracked dry and low. "Hey, Mama. Yeah, it was great. Arya is beautiful. Big restaurant, lots of customers, and the chefs, they're incredible." He forced a smile, but his throat tightened. "Chef Thorne, he said I have real potential." A long silence. His mother didn't speak. Maybe she was smiling on the other end, picturing her son glowing beneath chandeliers and delicate plates. "Yeah, I wore the black shoes. The ones you sent me. They looked great." Leo added his voice, breaking into a fragile breath. "I'm not crying. It's just onions from the kitchen. You know, real strong tonight." He raised a hand to his mouth. A quiet sob slipped out, barely contained. His shoulders shook. A tear rolled down his cheek and dropped onto the phone screen. He leaned his head against his knees, voice fading. "I promise I'm making you proud. A promise. Simple but sacred. And also a lie, not to hide failure, but to protect the one person who never stopped believing in him." In the distance, Julian stood in the shadows. He didn't approach. He simply stood there like a weather-worn statue eroded by the winds of a sleepless city. He looked at Leo, and saw himself 30 years earlier in another alleyway, blistered hands gripping a phone in the dark. "Mom, I'm okay." Julian leaned against the cold brick wall. His throat tightened. That lie, he remembered it. He had lived with it through all his youth, and now it had returned, wearing the face of a boy he'd never met, but understood completely. The dream Leo had held in his hands had just been ripped away cruelly, publicly, and without reason. Julian couldn't rewrite his own past, but he could protect this boy's future. From that moment on, the fight was no longer about profit, prestige, or power. It was about honor, and Julian Vance had never let anyone touch his honor without paying the price. Izzy was in a quick meeting with a few staff members in the break room. Her eyes were still red from stress. Some of the younger servers whispered anxiously about what had just happened, words like allergy, EpiPen, and Leo falling like shattered bricks in a room barely holding together. Then the door swung open. A man stepped in. No knock, no permission. The fluorescent lights hit his face. A blink. "Izzy," he said. His voice was low, calm, yet it rang like a bronze bell in a room already heavy with dread. She turned. Her eyes widened. "Mr. Vance." Julian gave a small nod. No hat. No pretense anymore. No one spoke for the first few seconds, but words were unnecessary. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. That single touch was a command the entire room understood. "Lock the front doors," he said. "No one goes out. No one comes in. Gather every employee, including Marcus, in the main dining room. Right now." Izzy swallowed hard. She didn't ask why. She didn't need more instructions. She turned and began to move. The main doors of Aria slammed shut. The sharp click echoed like a punctuation mark, an end to the chaos that had been hidden for too long. Marcus emerged from the kitchen, scowling. "What the hell is going on?" he barked. Then he saw Julian. First came the shock. Then a breath caught in his throat. The man standing there was no longer the weird tourist from Table 1. No longer someone to brush aside. He was Julian Vance, the man who had taught him everything, and the man who could take it all away. Every employee stood around the main dining room. Some looked down. Others stared at Julian as if clinging to something larger than fear. Izzy stood beside him, silent. Her hands were still trembling, but her eyes were harder than ever. No one spoke. No one moved. The air grew thick, so dense it could have been cut with a knife. Julian stepped forward, then another step. Each footfall echoed against the marble floor, sounding like a gavel before a verdict. He looked around the room. No need for name tags, no org chart. He already knew every face, not from paperwork, but from silent sidelong glances and exhaustion hidden behind polite smiles. He stopped in the center. No podium, no microphone. But everyone could hear what he was about to say. "Enough," he said quietly. And then silence. A silence so deep. You could almost hear a dream shattering. Outside, Aria night had fallen. The streetlights flickered on one by one. But inside, the only light came from the man who had just stepped out of the shadows. Not through rage in his eyes, but through something far more dangerous, the cold resolve of a father who had just seen his child hurt. The ghost at Table 1 had taken form, and the reckoning had begun. Julian stood at the center of Aria's dining room like a judge without a bench. No gavel in hand, only silence. He scanned the room. Every face still, red-rimmed eyes, heads lowered, hiding guilt, or the shame of having stayed silent too long. He didn't look at Marcus right away. He looked at the room. Tonight, he began, voice steady, not angry. "I'm not a guest. I'm a ghost. A ghost of the promises this place has forgotten." A beat of silence. No one dared breathe too loudly. Then Julian turned to Marcus. "Do you remember what I told you?" he asked. "On your very first night standing beside me at Aria." Marcus clenched his fists, said nothing. "I told you, every dish here must have a soul, and the one who makes it must keep their own soul intact." Julian stepped forward. "I built Aria from a cramped kitchen with cracked walls and a leaking gas stove. But I never let anyone feel small. I never turned a kitchen into a battlefield." He pointed to the floor. "You did. You turned perfection into an obsession. You wielded my name like a whip. You demanded excellence, but trampled the people who were fighting to reach it." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I did it, to uphold your standards. You taught me that perfection is everything." Julian shook his head, eyes briefly closing. "No, Marcus. I taught you to chase perfection in the plate, not to destroy the spirit of the one making it." He stepped aside, giving Izzy a small nod. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a phone, and played a recording. Leo's voice echoed faint, raw, but trying so hard to stay strong. "No, Mama, I'm not crying. It's just the onions from the kitchen. I promise I'm making you proud." No one in the room moved. Izzy ended the recording. Marcus stood frozen, his face drained of color. The cold mask he wore cracked and fell away. He stepped back. He stammered. "I didn't know." Julian looked at him, not with rage, not with cruelty, but with a disappointment as heavy as ash coating old memories. "I looked at that boy Leo and I saw myself, a kid willing to bleed for a dream. But you, Marcus, when you looked at him, what did you see?" A nuisance. Marcus dropped his gaze. For the first time, no longer a roaring lion, just a lost child. He whispered, "I just didn't want to fail. I didn't want to disappoint you." Silence, not the choking silence from before, but a weighted silence where truth had surfaced and fear had shed its skin. No one clapped. No one wept. But every eye in the room, from dishwasher to manager, had recovered something once thought lost, their humanity. Julian turned away. No need for more words. He hadn't slammed the table, hadn't raised his voice. The truth had been loud enough on its own. 3 weeks later, Manhattan was still loud, lights still blazed through the night. But inside Aria something had changed. Not the color of the walls, not the lighting, but the air. The way the staff looked at one another. The calmness in the kitchen, once a war zone. Leo now stood at the middle station slicing lemon peels. His movements were slow but steady. Beside him, Izzy reviewed orders with a new hire. Her voice wasn't sharp, wasn't rushed, just clear, composed, and warm. Julian entered through the back door. No announcement, no noise. He leaned against the kitchen doorway, hands in pockets, watching. No one needed to greet him. He didn't need to be recognized. He only needed to see that everything was running as it should, just as he once dreamed. Izzy turned and smiled. "He's here," she whispered to Leo. Leo turned. Today he wore a new apron, solid black with a single embroidered line across the chest, sous chef in training. He bowed deeply. "I won't let you down, sir." Julian didn't reply right away. He stepped forward and gently placed a hand on Leo's shoulder. "I know." In the break room, a postcard was pinned to the staff board. The back showed an old French kitchen in lion. 3 crooked lines scrawled in blue ink, "Thank you, chef. Marcus." No one said a word. But when Izzy read it, her eyes shimmered. Sometimes redemption doesn't come with promises. It begins when someone chooses to start over. That night, Julian sat once more at table 1. Same seat, same view. But his heart had changed. He wasn't observing to judge anymore. He was watching, to protect. Glasses clinked softly. A light jazz tune played in the background. No one recognized him. No one needed to. He closed his eyes, leaned back into the chair. The greatest success isn't building an empire. It's keeping its heart beating. A heart made of people. You've just experienced a story that touches the deepest corners of emotion. If you believe that even the most suffocated dreams can be revived with kindness and courage, if you've ever stayed silent before injustice, ever wept during a midnight call, or wished for a second chance, like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Toch Story, where stories like this are told with every beat of the heart. Because sometimes the right story at the right time can change an entire life.